Welcome to the M1 podcast, set up to provide features and stories from up and down and in and around the M1. I'm Garrett Mullen. If you enjoy these podcasts, please share and like. How are you managing in the cost of living crisis? Food, fuel, mortgages, rents have all gone up by so much in recent years. Who better to discuss this than with Irish Examiner cost of living correspondent, Balbriggan resident Caitriona Redmond. I'm with Caitriona Redmond, who's developed a profile over the last number of years in food, advice, campaigning, and is known for a column in the Irish Examiner, and I think they're the only newspaper with a cost of living correspondent. Is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
It's an interesting role that they've hired for, isn't it?
Well, it is interesting because I feel that the cost of living crisis is something that an awful lot of people discount. In some of, perhaps maybe let's call them the bigger ticket newspapers, they're more interested in the business aspect of the cost of living. But the cost of living affects us all, and we are all affected by having less money to spend on our groceries, by having less disposable income. And the fact that the Irish Examiner recognises that, I think, is very powerful. Sorry.
I think that's really interesting, because one of the things I've frustrated, and I do like my newspapers, but let's say the holidays that they advertise, they're always so expensive, or the clothes that they advertise, it doesn't seem to take. This jacket is $595. Yeah, who spends $595 on a jacket? So it's and then there is consumer correspondence, but I think the idea of trying to emphasise the cost.
Well, I think that what I do is I don't, tell people to do as I say. I talk to people about and explain to them how I live on a budget, because I do live on a budget, and we still live on a budget. In the last year, my husband took redundancy, and he's actually working, but he's actually not working. He's living at home on carers benefit for the next, there's still another 18 months to go, but he's taken 2 years carers leave, which has been fantastic for us as a family. But obviously that means that we have to live in an awful lot less, because he was working outside of the home, I work inside of the home, both in paid employment, but they're just different types. So we have to live on an awful lot less. So when I'm talking to people about living on less, living on a budget, having less money due to the cost of living crisis, it's because I know it, I live it, and this is how I do it. And
you got involved some years ago in setting up the allotments in Balbriggan, and I know a lot of people think, that sounds very healthy and good, and my wife is actually from Ukraine, where everyone grows their own food, and the idea of spending so much time on the allotment doesn't appeal to others. But have you found that growing your own food, it saves on cost of food?
I would say that if anybody went into growing their own food to save money, I think that it's an absolute fallacy. You're not going to save money growing your own food. But what you are going to do is you're going to know where your food comes from. You're going to get free exercise, free time out in the fresh air, loads of vitamin D, a sense of community if you join an allotment scheme. And yes, you will have really high quality fruits and vegetables every year that you simply can't get in the supermarkets, and a greater appreciation for what Irish farmers and producers do to get our food onto the shelves. It's not, for us, it's not a cost-saving exercise. If we were to assess how many hours per week we spend down there and how much time we've invested in it, we're losing money hand over fist. But the value to us as a family is the time that we spend together, growing together, the food that we eat together, the enjoyment that we have from sharing our food within our own home, and then with our extended family and neighbours if they're lucky enough to drop by on a day where we've harvested. So the benefits from that point of view are really, really high. From a cost point of view, I wouldn't say necessarily that having an allotment would save money.
Yes, it's okay. So that's a good deal. But you do offer advice about saving on this and that. What are the tips, or where are there areas where people can save on costs that they might not have thought of?
Well, I suppose people don't necessarily think about what they have in their presses and what they have in their fridges and freezers, because in the Irish psyche, once you've bought your food, that's the value of the food paid for. So they don't see that what they've got in their presses as assets. And maybe it's a little bit of the business head that I've got on me, because I worked in business for so many years and I still do. So what I say to people is, if you can organise a filing cabinet, you can organise your cupboards. And if you take a look at what you've got in your presses, most people will have maybe a couple of packets of dried noodles, a couple of bags of rice, maybe pasta, tinned beans, or maybe some vegetables in the freezer. Every single item that you've got in your household, that has value. And if you can use that up today, then you're going to save money on your shopping this week. So rather than going to the supermarket this week, I'd suggest that the best way that for you to save money is to go and shop in your own home and take a look at what you've got and find out new and inventive ways of using up what you've got. You'll save money straight away.
Oh my! I think go back to when I was a single man, and what was in my press was maybe a box of Weetabix, and that was about it. So
well, I mean, you could eat Weetabix 3 times a day and definitely save money. But for families, you will find that people hold some sort of a store. And then the other thing is to go back to basics. I mean, we talked about growing our own food, but actually Irish produce and Irish food is amongst the best in the world. I would argue it is the best in the world. And the simplest of foods can make the greatest of feasts. So a tray of eggs and a bag of potatoes, which are quintessentially Irish foods, can definitely give you plenty of amino acids, vitamins, carbohydrates, and can definitely feed a family over, say, an evening meal. Add in a tin of beans and you've got fibre, and all of those are budget ingredients.
And I think we've all noticed the cost of food has got a lot higher. But I seen one of your recent social media posts about the what is that, the Aldi? You posted something about the Aldi out of date, not out of date, but just before date.
So some of the supermarkets have things like, they call them their yellow sticker deals, and other of the supermarkets get rid of their items that are coming close to their expiry date. So each of the supermarkets have different ways that they deal with this. So Aldi lists their items on a Too Good To Go box. Now that's fantastic if you can log into the Too Good To Go app the day before and reserve the box by paying about €3.99 to €5. And once you reserve that box, then you go and pick it up at a designated time. And the value of what you might get in the box could be up to €30. Lidl, for example, also do a box, but it's called their, Waste Not box. And that includes vegetables and fruits that are on the turn or have been taken out of multi-packs on the shelves. And they pop them all into a box. And if you're lucky enough to get to Lidl at the right time, the box costs €5 and you could get several kilos of fresh fruits and vegetables that you could probably spend €20 on in a week. Tesco, then I can keep on going on this.
Do all the shops have them?
They do, pretty much. Like, I mean, I was in Tesco this morning, so Tesco have their yellow sticker fridge. Yeah. I'm not going to tell you what time because I know, but basically
I'd be competing with you, would I?
Yeah, but basically several times during the day Tesco goes through their shelves and they take items off that have come up to their expiry date. They go into a massive big fridge in the middle of the fridge section in Tesco, and if you chance there at the right time, you can get several days meals. And as it happens, when I'm talking to you right now, I have beef stew in the slow cooker. Keep an eye out, there'll be a video on that in coming weeks, but there's enough in that beef stew to feed our family for 3 to 4 meals, and I'll freeze what I don't use.
And with these little Aldi and Tesco apps, I'd say people should just go onto your social media and find the post about the names of those apps. But the idea is it's a bit like the Tesco Club Saver. You can see the items, but when you get to Tesco, do you have to go to particular points in the shop, or do you go to the customer service, or what?
No,
do you
go to the fridge section down near the I think it's on the aisle where you'll find ham and cheese.
And they just do frozen stuff?
No, it's fresh items. Okay. So in there today now, I mean, there was a couple of trays of macaroni and cheese, there was some chocolate mousses, there was garlic bread, there was stews, casseroles, and then there was cuts of meat as well. There was packages of sausages, and all of those just had to be used today, cooked today, and they're fine to eat.
And that post you put up about the Aldi just before that was really nice spread for about €4. You got so much.
I got enough to feed my family for a week.
Wow.
Yeah.
What's it called again?
Too Good To Go. It's an app. But I'm always happy if anybody has any questions. If you send me a message on one of my social media platforms, I'm always happy to chat about it.
So one thing in recent years, I've only probably only, even my own head, I just think the gas and electricity and smart meters, I monitor that now on a daily basis because we have to. It's got so expensive.
Yes.
But 2-3 years ago, was I even doing that at all? Like looking at how many kilowatts I use, I didn't even have a clue what that meant. We just paid the bill when it came. But in the last couple of years, energy costs have got a lot higher, haven't they?
Yeah, so energy costs have just skyrocketed. And for anybody who has a smart meter, if you go to the ESB Networks website, now it doesn't matter who your provider is, but if you go to the ESB Networks website, you can sign up with your MPRN, that's your smart meter number, and you have access to all of your smart meter data. I mean, if you don't have a much more modern box, this is the way to access your smart meter data, regardless of who your provider is. So I can log in today and I can see what energy I've used over the past week, which is really handy. I can always tell when I turn the kettle on because there's a big spike, because the kettle is quite a draw on electricity in the house. And learning how to control your energy and learning how to save money, that's really intrinsically tied into homemaking. And I don't say homemaking in terms of, the female sense of the word. It's not genderized, but it's in terms of, if you're cooking food is probably one of the biggest draws on energy that you have. If you're washing clothes, that's also quite a draw on energy. If you're running a tumble dryer, you may or may not be able to hear mine going in the background because it's a really mucky day outside. But all of these things use up energy, and there's ways of adapting the existing appliances that we have and learning how to adapt what we do to save on energy and save ourselves money ultimately.
And one of the things I've noticed is different companies have, even though there's smart metering, some companies have really good apps where you can see your daily usage, and it does help, because if you see that you spent €8 one day and €3 the next, so, okay, what was I doing on Tuesday as opposed to Wednesday? I think with COVID, a lot of strange things happened. How are you in these unusual times, people used to say. And then people saved up money or they paid off debt in COVID. And then out of COVID, the prices rocketed, didn't they?
Well, the price of food and the price of energy are all linked to... It's not just conflict, although they are very much linked to conflict, but in particular the price of food is also linked to some very poor harvests on the Iberian Peninsula. And what an awful lot of people don't realise is that the softer fruits and vegetables, and even the harder fruits and vegetables that we eat in the winter months, come from Iberia, so that's Spain and Portugal. And when climate change has begun to have an effect on what is being produced on the Iberian Peninsula, so we've had 2 successive years, and we're running into a 3rd year, of horrendous rains in that area, and that is creating difficulties for the growers in the area, which then has a knock-on effect on the fresh food that we eat, so for the likes of tomatoes, peppers, onions, etc. But then when you think about it, one of the largest products that comes from there is actually tomatoes, but not all tomatoes arrive at this shore fresh. They also arrive in ambient containers, which would be tinned tomatoes, which you're all familiar with. And the price of tinned tomatoes has nearly gone up by 70% in the last 2 years. And that's not just related to conflict and the cost of transport and Brexit, but also climate change. So the 3 biggest factors in driving up our food at the moment are climate change, Brexit, and then conflict.
Yeah, what can we do about any of those? Not grow your own, as you said earlier, but those apps are definitely worth looking at. And I think one of the things I see on your posts on social media and in your articles, great tips about what to cook and how to cook.
So, as I mentioned earlier on, at the moment on the counter I have a slow cooker working, and that's what is containing our dinner for later on. The slow cooker uses about the same energy as a light bulb, so it's much cheaper and much more cost effective to cook your food in than turning on a conventional oven. Basically, it works out about 25 to 30% the cost of an oven over the duration of the time. So I very rarely use my oven now. I'd only use my oven if I needed to bake, and maybe that's once a week. The other item that I use, if say I wanted to fry something, would be the air fryer, and again, that's cheaper than cooking in an oven. So I believe that ovens are on the way out in kitchens up and down the country. And these are the things that you need to know about to save energy and then to save yourself money in producing your food, because the cost of food isn't just what you pay when you go to the supermarket. The cost of the food that you put on the table has to be factored in with the cost of the energy you require to put it onto the table. So sometimes people will say, oh, I cooked a family meal for €5. In all likelihood they didn't. Their family meal could have actually cost them €6.50, because €1.50 is the cost of the energy required to put it onto the table.
Right. So you sound so planned and organised, but I guess it's just a case of doing a little bit every day, and then you generally get the benefit of that.
I hasten to add that my whole family says that I am probably the most organised person that they know. I live my life, you can't actually see it right now, but I live my life by whiteboards, spreadsheets, notebooks, calendars. Everything is all worked out by rote, and it turns out we actually have a neurodiverse household, so that organisation that I have really benefits the neurodiverse members of the household, so it's a win-win situation.
Okay, very good. One of the other aspects, and this whole cost of living thing, is you know, the other newspapers have to talk about, let's say, investments and what you can do with your money, and they never assume that the reader is kind of a bit tight with money, or you know, we're short of money, and I think most people are, and sometimes people don't like to talk about that, and I'll come to that in a minute. But it was just something someone said to me recently. She was 47. It was about her pensions, and said, you know, she'd only recently set up her pension contributions, the 5%, to match the 5% that the employer would give. And said, if only I knew then what I know now, I would have started earlier. How financially literate are people in Ireland, do you think?
I think that people in Ireland are incredibly financially literate, but the thing that gets in front of people is the financial commitments, because if you have a mortgage or if you have rent to pay in Ireland nowadays, that is a humongous cost. It's a humongous portion of your income. If you're raising family, then most of your money is going to go on keeping a roof over your head, bills paid, food on the table, and whatever the costs of the child are. And I believe that people are very financially literate, and they are aware of, you know, pension crisis upcoming, you know, the auto subscription to pensions, which is coming down the road. It's very important. But I believe that people are terrified of paying out money that they don't have access to. People have much less disposable income, and if you're paying out money on a pension, that's money you don't have to pay to raise your family, to pay for the roof over your head. So I think people know that ideally they would have a pension, but they can't actually commit the money to it.
And sometimes there's employers, for example, who discourage employees from sharing details about their salaries because they know then they get pay claims and so on. Are people reluctant to talk about finances and how they manage their money, or is that changing?
I think people are incredibly reluctant to talk about finances, but it's a topic that I'm very open about, because I believe that the more open we are about finances, the more open we are about our struggles, the easier it makes it for other people. The more we talk about things, the better it is. You know, over the last couple of years, there has been quite the mental health crisis in Ireland, and an awful lot more people talk about, you know, their mental health issues. When I say there has been a mental health crisis, that's not it. I mean, mental health has always been a crisis in Ireland, but the fact that it has come to the forefront of media and people are more willing to talk about it now, that's something that has been more noticeable. And you notice, you know, there's more kind of leaders and people talking about mental health struggles. And I feel that it's very important that we do the same about finances and financial health, because it's intrinsically linked with our mental health. When things were at their worst for us as a family and for me financially. If I didn't talk about it to my family and my friends, I think it would have been an awful lot less. And when I finally started to open up about how difficult we were finding it on my blog and on my social media, things started to get better. Not because they started to get better financially, but mentally they started to get better, because I knew that I had people supporting me and people who are willing to listen. And sometimes you just need to be listened to.
That's interesting, because sometimes we can think about the risks of social media and all the negativity. I've deleted Facebook and Twitter off my phone, for example, because I want a clearer head. But you found it beneficial to be able to share information about difficulties, and then the reaction's been quite positive.
Oh, hugely positive. And not only that, but it created a forum for more people to talk about it. So quite a proportion of the people who still get in touch with me are people who are struggling financially, asking for advice. But it's not necessarily that they are actually asking for advice, because they do know how to help themselves. It's more looking for a friendly ear, for somebody who understands, who's been there and knows what it's like. Because there is an awful lot of stigma attached to financial difficulty in Ireland. I don't know if it goes back to, the famine and losing homes, in particular in relation to difficulties paying for the family home. There's huge stigma attached to it, and people don't talk about it enough.
Yes, and there are lots of supports out there that people can avail of. You have a huge social media following on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. Is there a difference in how people engage with you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Twitter, or the artist formerly known as Twitter, I rarely use it anymore. I nearly say it's a cesspit. I would use it maybe to find out information, but I rarely post on it. Prior to the takeover of what was Twitter, I would have used it quite a bit. I had a verified account, but obviously when it was taken over, they got rid of unpaid verified accounts, and things have disintegrated since. I rarely use it. Facebook tends to be a more mature demographic, but that's not to say that young people aren't using Facebook. And I'm also using my experience from my day job, which is social media and communications. So younger people do use Facebook, but they use it for the groups. They don't post in general. They use it for kind of the community groups and people in the local area and that kind of thing, in special interest groups. Instagram is at once friendly and welcoming, but very appearance focused.
Yes.
So if I don't post something that's aesthetically pleasing, I know that it's going to fail.
Your food and the cakes and all that, it's all very aesthetically pleasing. It's got you 16,000 likes on Instagram or something like that, isn't it?
It's close to, hopefully we'll hit 17,000 this weekend. Yeah.
And your column with the Irish Examiner, that's a weekly column. Each week you're talking about
living on a budget, and then offering up some home economics advice on how to save money in the home. And then there's always a recipe to go with that, a recipe on a budget. And then every now and again I would maybe write a feature that's related to living on a budget, and in particular coming up to budget time, that's as in budget 2023 to budget 2024, I worked with the news team on articles relating to how families who are struggling will manage with the budget implications. So that's really interesting.
Very good, and a good reason for the circulation of the Irish Examiner to pick up in this part of the world, as well as the southerly regions of the country.
Yeah, well, actually, quite a few of the writers are based in and around this area. We have a Dublin office, so while we do certainly have an office down in Cork, we have writers all over the country. So it's the Irish Examiner now; it's not the Cork Examiner.
Very good. Oh, it's been the Irish Examiner for a good long time.
Yeah.
Caitriona Redmond, thanks very much for joining me.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Well, plenty of food for thought there. Well, inflation has dropped back a bit. People are still feeling the pinch. There are benefits to growing your own food, but costs and savings aren't one of them. While people are acutely aware of costs, there is much they do not control. Yet at the same time, there is great unwillingness to discuss finance. So open up the conversation. Tell your workmates your salary. Here's some hints and tips to help. Be organised with your own stores at home, because what you use will save you on the shop. Check out the Aldi Too Good To Go or other stores yellow stickers deal, because you'll save a lot of money there. If you have a smart meter, monitor it, because you can see your use and cost of energy day by day. And lastly, of course, check out Caitriona's cost of living column in the magazine section in the Irish Examiner each Saturday. Stay with us for episodes coming up, where we'll be looking at topics of interest for those of you who are up and down and in and around the M1. I'm Garrett Mullen, and this is the M1 podcast, and thank you to David West for sound and editing.